demonstrate live. So I will show some slides, then I will uh, sort of show something live, and then I'll turn it over to you. I've got more content today. I'm going to go a little bit faster, but there's no rush because we've got the whole week. And so if I don't finish it, if people want to ask questions, we're among friends here. So oh, look at this. I didn't finish my objectives. Anyway, the what I'm going to do today is I'm going to review what we did yesterday. Then I'm going to show you the second way of how to save notebooks and how to save them in Spidal, which is really the preferred way. Then I'm going to start looking a little bit at JavaScript code. So my goal is not to teach you to be JavaScript programmers. What I want to teach you how to do is to be able to manipulate JavaScript code that you get from elsewhere. The way we did yesterday, where we edited the list of words that we were going to search for, that we were going to graph in the trends display. But I want to give you a little bit of a sense of the syntax, since many of you, I think, are linguists or people who have expertise in language. You might be interested in the JavaScript language. Um, then I'm going to show you how you can create a Spidal notebook from scratch. And I'm going to show you various techniques for borrowing code. So you can take code from somewhere else and repurpose it. So you don't have to write it yourself. And in fact, one of the points I want to make, and I sort of made it in response to the question about named entities, is that we actually have been putting up a whole mess of tutorials that have different examples of things you can do. So we're trying to create if you will, an encyclopedia of code that you can use. And and to do that in particular, I'm going to show you how to use the integrated help. Okay, so starting off, first of all, just to review what we did yesterday, we learned how to create a Spidal notebook from Voyant. We learned a little bit of how to edit the notebook, how to be able to edit the text cells, the code cells, how to create a new text cell, how to create new code cells, how to copy code from one Spidal notebook to another one and adapt it and run it. And then at the end, we learned how to save the notebook to HTML and then be able to reopen it. So now what I'm going to show you is the second way and the preferred way for saving your notebooks, and that's to use the Save and Save As button, which is in the control area in the upper right. In order to do this, you have to have a GitHub account, and I think I asked you yesterday to get yourself a GitHub account. And when you have that, you can click the save button, type in ID, and your notebook then instead will have a sensible name, and you can then access it from your own account later on. And that's what this looks like here. So when you've logged into GitHub and it knows who you are, you'll have a list of the different notebooks the different notebooks that you've created in sort of chronological order. So let's take a look at that. I'm switching now to my browser. So this is the notebook sort of for today's workshop. For yesterday and today's workshop, I've added a whole mess of stuff at the bottom about what we're going to cover today. We can ignore that, but you can always return to it. But here's the notebook which I created, saved to HTML, and then reopened. And if you look up in the URL bar, you'll see that it doesn't have a name. It doesn't belong to anyone. So this has not been saved to the system. In order to save it, I need to first log into GitHub. And I do that by just clicking on the My Account button, which is this one over here, the little sort of simplified icon of a person. And I click Sign in with GitHub, and it automatically signs me in. If it's the first time you're doing this, it's going to ask you for your GitHub credentials. You're going to have to go through a longer sign-in process. But then GitHub will leave a cookie, and your browser will know that you can sign into GitHub automatically. Now, if I go to the View Your Account button, when I click on it after having gone through the sign-in process, now I get a list of all of my notebooks. And you'll see that there's a little button here. I can also log out if I was using a public computer or something like that and didn't want people messing with my notebooks. I can click the not log out button. You'll see that there is the capacity to delete notebooks, so I can select them and delete them. I can open selected notebooks. I can double click to open a selected notebook. Anyway, so now I've logged in. The system recognizes that it knows me. And at this point, I can click on this little cloud button here. And that gives me a menu of two options, save and save as. Now, obviously, you can only save notebooks that you own in some sense. You couldn't go in, you can go into somebody else's notebook and edit it, but you can't save it because you don't have the permissions. You can save as. But in this case, it's my notebook. I uploaded it. It doesn't belong to anyone. If I click save, it now gives me this dialog box asking me for a notebook ID, and I'm going to call it my Austin notebook to save. I click the save button. It takes a bit of time. And if you look up at the URL bar now, you'll see that there's two new items, if you will. First of all, so it's got voyanttools.org/spiral. Then we have Jeffrey Rockwell at GH for GH is GitHub. So that sort of says who it is who owns this notebook. And then the name of the notebook is My Austin Notebook to Save. So there you are. You can see that this is now saved. And if I edit it, I'm adding more text. If I edit it, I can now just go under the cloud here, hit save, and it will update the notebook the way you would expect. And you see the little thing down at the bottom that says notebook save. Now, all of you, if you want to, you can, I'm going to put this in the Zoom. Where's the Zoom chat? Okay, here we are, chat. All of you, if you want to, you can go in and look at this notebook. The notebook is not hidden. Um, so I've just put it into the Zoom chat. You can go in and look at it. You can even edit it and you can run things, but you can't save it because you don't own it. You're not Jeffrey Rockwell at GH. What you could do if you have an account is you could fork it and save it under your account with the name that you want to give it. So one of the things that you need to realize about Speedal is to some extent, Speedal is meant to be a public environment. It's meant for teaching and for sharing code. We have not built privacy functions in here, though to some extent it'd be very hard for anyone to find this notebook, especially since you'll remember when we were looking at the metadata, if I don't click this button here, it's not included in the public catalog, and somebody would have to know the exact file name, if you will, notebook name the ID in order to be able to find it. But it is nonetheless not hidden. It's not behind a password or anything like that. So people can take it, play with it, try it out, and fork it. And that's a philosophical decision that we made because we see Speedal as a way of documenting and sharing text analysis and visualization, both for research purposes and for teaching purposes. So at this point, I'm going to switch back to asking you to try it yourself. So I'd like you to play around a bit with your your notebook, sign in to GitHub, save your notebook under some sensible name. When you're choosing a name, don't put any spaces in and avoid punctuation. Try to keep it a little bit like the name that I used here, my Austin notebook to save. So I use numbers and letters, but it's all one long thing because you have to remember these are being saved under file names and stuff like that. So I'm going to turn it over to you and quit the Zoom so that people can ask me questions. So take it away and try saving it under your own account.
Okay. Regimo said we send link. Oh, you just enter. So I'm going to drop all the links that we shared. Um,
I'll drop the link to the notebook that I just saved,
okay.
but I'll also drop the link to the if you will the tutorial the workshop notebook. This is sort of the outline of what I'm doing.
This is the workshop notebook. Let's see. For those who are just joining us, we're on try it now. What has just been taught, and the link to the notebook is. I haven't chosen a personal ID for the first time. I saved, can I edit it later? So there's a question from Sylvia. She asks if I haven't chosen a personalized ID the first time I saved, can I edit it later?
I think Viant just sort of picks a sort of random set of letters and numbers, but you should go into your account and you should see it. Unless what happens is, it could be that you close down your browser without actually saving it. I'm not sure exactly what Speedal is going to do, but go into your account and see if you can see the notebook.
Okay, she says she's seen it. She's seen it.
Yeah, so you can open it, and then if you want to, use Save As to save it under a different name. You can now give it a name, but you'll notice when you're in the your account area, you'll notice that the titles, description, and tags show up. So you can find your notebooks if you give it a if you enter a sort of some text in the description, it'll make it easier to disambiguate if you have multiple notebooks that are doing sort of the same things. I don't know about you guys, but whenever I'm writing papers, I have the such and such paper two, and then I have three, and then I have dot latest, and then I have dot latest, and then dot final, and then even after the final, so you can. Okay, I'm gonna now continue, unless there's somebody who would like me to pause a second. So I'm gonna first share, and good. I'm sharing screen. Now, what I wanted to do now was talk a little bit about JavaScript code. As I said, my goal is not to teach you JavaScript, though I think, especially those of you who have a background in programming, there are very good online tutorials and books about JavaScript if you want to learn it on your own. For the rest of you, what I want to do is just give you some defensive capability to understand what can go wrong. As with all programming languages, Syntax is king or queen. If you leave out the smallest little quotation mark or comma or something like that, you will get an error. And in fact, when you're writing your own code, I don't know about the rest of you, but I almost never get it right the first time. I'm always having to debug, go off, find an example, compare it to my example, count the parentheses, count the curly brackets and everything and make sure that it's good. So I thought it would be useful just to go over some of the examples of syntax errors that you can get. One of the most common when I'm doing this is I leave off a quotation mark. So in that first example there, we've got the trends tool that we were doing. We've got the courtesy titles, Mr., Mrs. And if you notice in Miss, we have the opening quotation marks, but not the closing quotation marks. And if I run this, it'll give me an error line. Likewise, if I don't have nicely balanced parentheses, curly braces, and brackets, I will also get a problem. So I'm going to go there and just illustrate this in my Austin notebook here. So I'm scrolling down to the trends line. If I delete one of the quotation marks and then try to run it, it gives me an error. And you'll notice that it actually shows me it shows me where it thinks the error, something started to go wrong. It will not necessarily select and identify exactly the place which is wrong. But what it's doing is it'll give you a hint. So it's basically going, well, I hit this quotation mark, but there's no matching one. So this one is an illegal token. And if I look at this, I go, oh, yeah, the word miss doesn't have a matching one. So I am going to put the matching quotation marks on the other side. And now if I click, Ah, and now we get a different error. And you guys should all know this error because I warned you about it yesterday, but this is my fault. This is not a syntax fault. This is that it has no idea what my corpus is because I haven't actually run the first code cell that loads the corpus. So I'm going to run that now. It's loaded the corpus, and now when I run this, it should generate the trends tool. This is a very common error that I'm forever coming back into a notebook, scrolling way down, trying to run something and forgetting that there's a couple of cells above that need to be run. Now, another problem that you frequently have is balancing the different braces and stuff like that. And so here, if you look at this code, I'm going to expand it a little bit so that it's a little bit bigger. So if you look at it, we have mycorpus.tool. MyCorpus is an object, it's the corpus object. It's a named object. We have tool, which is a method. It's a method of the corpus object in general. It takes two parameters. The first parameter is the name of the tool, and that has to be in quotation marks. Then we have a comma, so parameters are typically separated by commas. And then the second parameter has a different type, is not surrounded by quotation marks, but is now surrounded by curly brackets. And that is the syntax for an object. Typically, when you're giving some sort of configuration to an object, you will have curly brackets, curly braces, and then you will have a series of two things, the name of the parameter and the value of the parameter. In this case, we have only one parameter. The parameter is query. The colon says, okay, we've got a parameter called query, and then we have an array, and this is what the square brackets are. We have an array, and inside the array, we have three values, Mr., Mrs., and Miss, separated by commas with quotation marks because they're all strings. So in just that one line, we have a whole mess of different things that can go wrong. So for example, if I had an extra square bracket because I'm typing too quickly, and I try to run this, I get another error. And this time it identifies correctly where the actual the offending thing. Or if I put in if I delete let's say the parentheses at the end, so now the tool method, we have an open parentheses, but we don't close it. And I run that, again, it sort of goes, something's wrong here. And so I'm going to put it back in. I know it's fiddly and it's sort of annoying, and this is why computers are not intelligent as people are. But you have to always balance these things. If you have an open parentheses, you've got to close it somewhere. If you have an open curly bracket, you've got to close it somewhere. If you have an open square bracket, you've got to close it. If you have a quotation mark, you've got to close it. It all needs to balance out, and then your code will run. So, um, there is a different type of thing that can go wrong. So those are examples of how syntax, when you're typing quickly or you're editing something, something goes wrong. And you have to learn to sort of be careful and reread and debug your code. Anyone who's done a lot of programming will know that you do a little bit of programming and lots of debugging, lots of testing, lots of checking to make sure. So don't feel bad if things don't work. That's normal. But there's a second type of thing which can go wrong, which is where you actually enter a value that doesn't exist. So in this case, I've just added an X to the word miss. And in Austin, nowhere is there the word miss X. Um, that just wasn't these new pronouns and courtesy titles just didn't exist back then. So now if I run it, you'll notice that I get two lines. But first of all, I'm not actually getting the little counts. It's this is a case where the thing doesn't quite know what to do with the third value. It puts it up in the key, but there are no words, and the display as a result doesn't display the way it should. You'll remember, here's what it looks like. If it runs properly, if it's given words that exist for each one of the novels, there's going to be a dot that you can roll over that gives you the exact value. So 1811, Sense and Sensibility. There's a relative frequency of 0.0044182. But all that stuff was missing when I had a value that couldn't exist. Now we don't have the dots. We have the lines and we have the bars, but it's still not behaving properly. And this is a case not of JavaScript syntax, but it's a case where I've entered a value that doesn't exist and therefore it's sort of pooped out. So those are two different ways that things can go wrong and two different things to sort of problem solve when you're working. So what I'd like you to do is right now is to play around a little bit. Just try deleting some things and seeing what the code does and get comfortable with the idea that you need to debug, that things can go wrong. And yeah, give it a try. And remember, there is no shame in debugging. Very few people get their code right from the very start. And so I'll pass it over to you and answer any questions.
So you can drop your question in the chat, or you can put up your hand. And as we did yesterday, if you want to share your screen, if you have some challenges or need support, but this is the time for hands-on. Those who are just joining, if you're just joining and you don't have access to the notebook, you can drop that in the chat and we will send you the link. So just notify us that you don't have access so that we'll know.
Yeah, for those of us who are just joining, I showed how to, if you have a GitHub account, how to be able to sell, how to save to Spiral. And now I'm talking about debugging, about what can go wrong. So you haven't missed much. Okay, I'm going to start sharing and go on to the next step. Please don't be embarrassed to stop me and just ask questions. Augustine is there if you want to put something in the chat. Um, Now, what we're going to do is we're going to start a series of exercises building, if you will, building a notebook from scratch. And so we've seen how you can export from Voyant. We've seen how you can sort of, export multiple results and then copy and paste the code and edit it a little bit. And now we're going to begin to see different ways of building a notebook from scratch where perhaps you haven't already worked in Voyant and stuff like that. So, um, the first thing to learn is how to create a notebook from scratch, and that's what the little plus button does. And we're going to look for a second at a totally new notebook. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go to one of the tutorial notebooks and we're going to find some code, again, the trends tool, but we're going to find a code that does more complicated things. And we're going to sort of start to understand that code. We're going to copy it, paste it in, and use it. So I'm going to start that process here. So first of all, I'm going to create a, get that out of the way. I'm going to create a new notebook. So I create the plus sign there. It's good practice to always give this notebook a title. So let's see, this is going to be experimenting with trends. And I'm going to give it just a short sentence. This is an experiment with the trends code. And it's also probably a good idea to get into the habit of documenting what you're doing. Part of the philosophical idea behind, part of the philosophy behind literate programming that I mentioned yesterday, Donald Knuth's idea, is that you don't write code and then afterwards sort of describe what was going on and comment on it. Instead, you want to sort of start with some post-it notes, if you will, of what it is that you want to do, and then add the code later on. So I'm going to take this first text cell and I'm going to replace it with some of my own comments. But I'm actually going to leave this line here that says the Spiral tutorials table of contents because that's where I'm going to go to get text. So I'm going to say to get code. I'm going to go here for examples of code. And then up here, I'm going to replace this. I'm going to say, I'm going to now show how to borrow code from elsewhere. So I've done that, and I'm going to save this. We know how to save it. So this is, I'm going to call this experiments with trends. As with anything, it's a good idea to save on a regular basis. And every once in a while, you should probably save to HTML2 because, if our server goes down, and you want to get access to this, you may want to have the HTML locally, especially if you're writing a paper or later on or something like that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to this to the list of tutorials. And so this is a Spiral notebook, which has a whole mess of different notebook that can help you learning Spiral, but can also give you examples of code. And I actually went there yesterday when somebody asked me about named entities and whether or not I could create a social network graph or map them. I went there. You'll see here, this is sort of useful if you're trying to remember Spiral, because Spiral is probably the sort of tool that you will use intensively, and then you'll put it down because you're teaching for 3 months. And then when you return, you're trying to go, oh, how do I use code cells? How do I get help? And so on like that. So you can always go back here. And then here we have a list of notebooks that show you different ways to use some of the tools, including the one Trends, Cyrus, Collocates Graph, and Corpus Collocates. And so we have a number of different ones. I'm going to click on the one for Trends. So this is a notebook that shows all sorts of different things you can do with trends. And I'm just going to walk through this notebook and show you a little bit about it. I'm going to save. I'm going to save the. Sorry, I'm going to run the different cells. So I'm going to actually sort of walk through and do this. So the simplest way to use the trends tool is simply to have mycorpus.tool and then trends. And when you run that, it creates a version of the panel as wide as your window will let it be. So whatever the width of the window, it'll make it that width. Then I start showing different things that you can do. Um, so here I changed two different things. You'll remember I was talking about how the curly braces, you're going to be using them a lot because that's how you enter, sorry, that's how you enter all the different parameters for a tool. So the curly braces, here we have two sort of parameters. What we have is an object. It's really a dictionary because each one of these items has two things, the name of the value and then the actual value. So we have limit is a parameter that sets the limit of number of words that are going to get graphed. So in this case, it's 9, so it's going to graph the top 9 most frequently used words. And then the second one is style. And we have some text here that we can actually set the width and height. So 600 pixels by 500 pixels. I run this. We have 9 words. And it's set the width of it to be 600 pixels and the height to be 500 pixels. So going down a little bit further, um, I've got some comments here on the style thing. We've looked at the query, the business of query. You can sort of give a query. We saw one way of doing the query is to have an array of words, but you can also just put a couple of words. You can put an exact query, the sort of thing you would type into the query box. You can put that just in quotation marks. Somebody asked me about using raw rather than relative distributions, and this is the thing. So what we're going to do now is we're going to copy this code. So this is what we want to do in order to get the raw distribution, and I'm going to paste it in. But if you look at this, you'll see that I'm missing something. This code, if I run it, will say my corpus is not defined. Because in the actual in the tutorial notebook, the line of code assumes that I'm going to run a line of code that loads the corpus first. So you can see again, I'm going to create a code cell. And here I'm going to do load corpus, Austin, assign. Now I'm going to check that this is correct. Load corpus Austin dot assign my corpus. That looks correct. The semicolon, by the way, is after you write a line of code, an expression, you can put a semicolon. That matters more when you have multiple lines of code. In this case, I have one cell with just one line. I probably don't need it. I'm going to run that. And now, when I run this, I should get the raw distribution. So Mr. shows up 1,153 times in Emma, 432 times. So somebody was asking me yesterday about raw distribution versus relative. Here's how this is the parameter that you can do to get that. So I'm going to return to my slides here. So you can see here we've got a lot of different parameters. So I'm actually going to grab this, copy it, or I could actually grab it from elsewhere, but I'm going to grab that. I'm going to add a code cell, and I now have this longer bit of code. I don't need the load corpus, Austin, because I've already loaded it. So I'm going to just put my corpus. So I'm now editing this. And one of the things I'm trying to illustrate here is that one of the things, and I'm going to show you how to do this, how to get these longer bits of code from the help, is I'm taking something that has a whole mess of different parameters, configurations, and then I can delete the ones that I don't want. So, for example, I might want to keep the query. I might want to keep the with distributions. I'm not interested in the doc index. So the doc index is when you have a corpus, which we have here, you can say, I want a distribution, instead of having a distribution of the whole corpus, I want a distribution of one particular text. And in this case, zero, those of you who do computing know that when you're counting items, you start with zero, not one. So zero is love and friendship. And Lady Susan would be the first, would be the document index one. It's the second document, but it's the document index one. Anyway, I don't need that, and I don't need the chart type, and I'm not going to bother with the other items. But let's look a second at the grammar here, the syntax. The syntax is very similar to what we had before. We had the parenthesis, opening, and closing. We had the name of the tool, and then the comma. But now what we've done is to make it easier to read, we put the curly braces there, and then we put each of the different parameters, if you will, each of the different configuration settings, we put them on their own line. And perhaps I can I'll delete the comments to make this clearer. And they each are in their own line, and they each have a comma separating them. We don't need the last comma. but I'm going to leave it there. It doesn't harm it because I might want to add more configurations later on. So we basically have a list of these tuples of these, name of the parameter, value, name of the parameter, value. And in a second, I'll show you where you can get these from. But let me run this. So I've love, joy, peace, and sadness. It looks like there's a lot more love than sadness. And the distributions here are raw. Um, so there you are. I've grabbed some text. I've copied it. I've grabbed some text from a tutorial. I've copied it. I've edited it and run it. So I'm going to turn it over to you now and let you do that. So I want you to play with the trends tool, and I want you to go to the tutorial on trends, and I will actually I will copy the URL for the tutorials. I will copy that into the Zoom. Um, I need to stop sharing. Copy this into the Zoom, and you should go down to the trends tutorial, play around with it, find some code that you want, borrow it. And there is, just as there's no shame in debugging, there's no shame in borrowing code. The philosophy of Spidal is to share all these things openly so people can borrow code that works and adapt it. So go ahead and play away. So I see Sylvia asks why all the lines are green. We have a feature in Voyant called categories. This is a very advanced feature. Categories are lists of words that you want to that are similar. And built into Voyant, we have two categories, which are a sort of simple version of sentiment analysis. One category is positive words, and one category is negative words. So we have this list, a long list of positive words, a long list of negative words. And one of the things you can do with categories is assign colors to them. And I will, after you guys have played around with the trends, I'll go in and give you a quick little tour through the categories. But we have assigned the green to the positive words and red to the negative words. And those color assignments will override the random colors that get chosen by the trends tool. So where you're using words that are positive, that are in these categories, you can turn the categories off, and what's really cool is you can create your own categories. So if you're looking at botanical words, you might have a category of trees, different words for trees, different words for flowers, different words for birds, pollinators, and so on like that. And then then you can use those categories in interesting ways. So sorry, the categories can work in any language. We only have by default, the only two categories we have, well, we have one category set, which is made up of two categories, positive and negative. We have also loaded, there was a famous project at Harvard, a text analysis tool developed in 66, called the General Inquirer, which was a social science tool. And they created a dictionary of like 100 different categories. And we have actually loaded those up into Voyant, and you can access them through, if you want to. They're not running by default, and they are all English. But there's nothing stopping you from creating your own set of category sets and then sharing that with other people. And I can show you separately. We can talk about how to do that. I'll actually I'll give a little spin around the categories if you want. But right now, let's focus on borrowing code. No shame, borrow away. You don't have to learn how to, this idea that programmers write from scratch is not true. Good programmers borrow, 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 and eventually you learn to build your own sort of encyclopedias of objects and so on like that. Any questions? Is the playing around with trends working?
Um, okay. I think CVS question has been answered. Do we have any question? Eh, Are we following? Are we practicing at the other side?
Okay, well,
Yes,
if
yes, we are practicing. Yes.
Okay.
so, is it working, Abel?
Yeah, it's working. My internet is kind of slow, so I'm still trying to follow to I'm at the point where I'm practicing getting the trends code. So
Okay.
yeah, so that's where I'm at now. But I'm following the discussion actually. Thank you.
So take your time. We'll give it another minute or so, and then in a second I'll show you some. I'll show you another way to borrow code.
All right, Prof. Thank you.
Those who just joined us today, are you following or you have some questions to be able to jump in? So I could see some names. Isione Obi, are you following? Just join us today. And we have Bofilo. So if you have problems, you can or questions, you can drop that in the chat too. We'll be able to support you.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to start the next section. I'm actually, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip one exercise I had and move to. I have to share my screen. I'm going to move to talking a little bit more about the code, and then I'm going to show you how you can get a good example code to borrow from the help system. Um, and then I'll let you loose on that. So first of all, some more words about the code. For those of you who are interested in some sense in languages, programming languages are a fascinating sort of example of almost Russian dolls. So in this one line of code here, you can see that we actually have multiple different languages at work. We have uh, we have the red, which is the syntax of JavaScript. We have the green, in the case the my corpus tool dot tool. That is code, if you will, a library that we built in JavaScript to make the Spidal work smoothly. So you don't have to write raw code. We have created a series of objects and methods, the corpus object and the tool method, so that you can, in one line of code, you can create a Voyant panel. So we have built on top of raw JavaScript. If you just opened an editor and played with JavaScript, you wouldn't have this dot tool method. It wouldn't know about trends or anything like that. And then we have JSON, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation. We have various ways for describing content or data, and these come from JSON here. The curly brackets, the quotation marks, and some of you may have used JSON. It's used a lot for certain types of formal data exchange. It you may have played with some of the different graph markup languages in JSON and so on like that. So we have, in some ways, there's a lot of different things going on in this code. And if you're interested, you might want to sort of look into it a little bit more. So one of the ways you can look into it, which is sort of new, is if you have access to ChatGPT, you can just sit there and say, give me a little introduction to JavaScript syntax, or give me an introduction to the syntax of, give me an introduction to the syntax of JSON or something like that. And it will give you some examples and introduce you. Otherwise, you can, if you go to our list of tutorials, down at the bottom, we have some tutorials about JavaScript. So W3 Schools has got a nice step-by-step learning of JavaScript. Eloquent JavaScript is actually a whole textbook. You can buy the book, or you can just follow the book online, and there's this promise tutorial here. And I'm sure there's lots of other ones. This is probably a little bit out of date. So you can, if you want to, just sort of Google, good up-to-date JavaScript resource. For those of you who know programming languages, I have actually put together a couple of little cheat sheets. I actually did it with ChatGPT, and here's a little bit of them, but I put together two one-page cheat sheets, and I will upload those and provide a link to, I'll give a link to Augustine that he can circulate. But here's just some things that you might want to use. Comments. We already talked about comments. Two angle brackets gives you a comment. Variables. Often you'll find that you need variables. Variables are like containers. They're like bowls. When you're cooking, you need lots of bowls to put things in. And sometimes you need bowls that are temporary bowls. And there are different ways to create variables. If you're into programming, there's the whole issue of scope. If you use var for variable, name of the name of the container, and then you can put something inside it. This one will travel from code cell to code cell. If you don't do that, if you just do let my text equals, it'll just stay in the code cell. Functions are very powerful. This is how you build functions that do something. This is a simple function that simply greets someone. You give it a name, and it returns hello and a name. And then arrays are lists, structured lists that allow you to do things to sets of words and stuff like that. And here I've got a little cheat sheet, if you will, on different data types. Strings are what we're going to be manipulating mostly. Numbers, you don't need to put quotation marks around. Boolean, true, false, you don't have to. Um, Objects, as I pointed out, you are surrounded by curly braces and then have a series of key value pairs. And arrays have square brackets and so on like that. So there's my 5 second, and I apologize to all of you who don't have a background in programming, but this will begin to make more sense as you play around with with Spidal and JavaScript. And I encourage you to maybe take one of those tutorials to begin to get some familiarity. So now back to the important stuff. Let's talk about the help, how we can get help. I'm going to show you two ways to get help. The first way is you can always get to the main documentation page from the bottom of Voyant by clicking the Voyant Tools thing. But far more interesting than that is going to be the inline or the integrated Speedal documentation. And this is what I'm going to show you because this allows you in your Speedal notebook, you can open a pane to the right, which has the documentation. And in particular, the one that's particularly useful is you click on Tools Documentation, and that will get you a list of the different tools. And if you go down to the tool that you want, you'll see example code that can work sort of more or less out of the box. Um, and you can basically grab the code that you want and put it in. So let's take a look at that. So I'm back in my experimenting notebook here, and let's say I want to have a different type of chart. I don't want this sort of line chart. I want a bar chart. So I'm going to make this a bit smaller. Now, the first way of getting help that I mentioned is to go down here, wherever you are, there's this credit line at the bottom that says Voyant Tools, Stefan Sinclair, Jeffrey Rockwell. If I click on Voyant Tools, it opens up the full documentation page. And you'll notice if you look down here, you can search for stuff. We have documentation for Voyant and we have documentation for Spiral. And it might be useful to wander through that, but it probably won't be that useful unless you understand enough about JavaScript and programming. It can be useful for Voyant because we have a number of guides and we have stuff about how to use the different tools. I'm not going to focus on that one. There's a more useful way when you're programming Speedal, and that's to click the little plus sign up here. So that little plus sign, when you click that, it opens this pane on the right. And if you're trying to figure out how to do something with a tool, you click on the tools documentation and it gives you a list in the tools in alphabetical order. So down here is trends. I click trends and it now gives me a series. It tells me the different parameters. And you'll see right up here, we see one that says chart type string. And it gives me the different options, area, bar, line, stacked bar line. But if I go down to the bottom, no, it's not the bottom, to the top, it gives me example code. And this is code with all the different configurations. And this is slightly more complicated code than you're used to. But I'm going to explain it to you. But first, what I'm going to do is to copy it. So I'm going to copy it. I'm going to create a new code cell. I'm going to paste it in. So let me explain this code to you. The first section here has just created a variable called config. And that variable is an object. It's got the curly braces. And then it's got a list of the different name value pairs with commas after each one of them. And then we have the line that actually calls the tool. In this case, load corpus Austin. I don't need that. You all should be going like, oh yeah, we've already got that. I can just write my corpus. We've already loaded the corpus and we've given it a name. So now you'll see that we say trends and then we call config. So instead of putting the config inside that line, we've got it separated out where we can do stuff with it. And I'm going to get rid of all the things that I don't want. And here I am going to type, what is it I wanted? I wanted the bar, I wanted bar. And but let's say I want these same words here. So I want the same query with the words. So I have chart type bar, query. I can actually put this in quotation marks if I want to be consistent. I can get rid of that final comment. And cross your fingers. Let's see if this works. Okay, there we are. For each of the novels, we have 4 bars. Maybe I'm going to get rid of a word here. I'm going to get rid of piece, just so there's fewer bars. So we now have 3 bars. I have a different type of chart. To summarize, what I did is I opened up the integrated help. I went to the tools documentation. If you're new to programming, don't click on any of the other buttons. They will just confuse you because it's all about the different objects and stuff. But here, I clicked on trends. At the very top, I had to scroll up. We give an example of the code with all the different parameters set to null, so they don't do anything. But you can copy that and then delete the parameters that you don't want. And here's a list of the different parameters: bins, chart type. What are the other choices of chart type? Area. Let's try area. What do we get if we get an area? That's sort of like a steam graph, which can be useful but not so useful. I'm going to go back to bar, doc ID. This allows you to identify the actual document. So if I wanted to do love and friendship, I would do doc. You have to enter these things exactly how no, I think I want doc index. And because I'm entering a number, I don't have to put it in quotation marks. So now what we're going to get is a bar chart, but just for one text. Let's see what we get. And you'll notice that this bar chart has 10 segments. These are the bins, because when we just do one document, we don't have separate documents to split it in. It automatically splits it into 10 parts. And by the way, this is what you can set up here with bins. Uh, what do we have here? Height, labels, limit, mode, query, so on, so on, so on. So we have all these different things that we can play with. So I'm now going to encourage you to try this yourself. So I want you to open the integrated health, go to the tools, find the trends tool, documentation, and then try copying all the code in and then deleting and editing it until you've got something. And once you've done that, you should realize that you can now get any tool you want from that list. So you can basically create the code to generate any one of the Voyant panels with any of the parameters once you get used to playing around with that. So take it away and try it out.
I've got a challenge. I've got a question here,
Great.
and yeah, and I'm trying to figure out how you were able to. Maybe I should share my screen. Perhaps you can help me.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, go ahead. Who is it
okay,
who's talking, by the way?
it's Abel. It's Abel that is talking. Sorry.
Great, great.
Yeah. Um, so um,
Augustine is able.
Yes,
Yes, able is able.
yeah, Abel is Abel. Yes, I am. So I'm getting this error. If you can see my screen now, I'm
Yeah.
trying to see if I could load. I know the challenge has to do with this my corpus tool. So I was trying to see how I could run um, where I can solve this problem. Um, I know you were talking about it, but my network got frozen, so I didn't hear when you rectified the problem. So how can I
Yeah,
solve
so
it?
so what you need to do, this is a case where you need to run the first cell
Yeah,
because the first cell, if you don't run the first cell, and if you just try to run the second cell, the system doesn't know what my corpus is. It's the first cell which loads it and then assigns it a name, my corpus. So run the first code cell.
yeah. I copied this first code from I think here.
Yeah, yeah,
I
but
copied it.
go back to your notebook. You didn't run it.
Okay, I tried running it.
You got to
Oh,
click there.
oh,
Now you
okay.
see it's
Oh,
running, and
oh,
now
wow.
it says my corpus, and now you can run the second one, and it should work.
Oh, yeah, it did. Oh, I was actually on point, but I didn't run it. I thought I had run. Oh, thank you.
No,
Yeah,
I believe you saw it happen to me too. I always
yeah,
forget that you've got to.
yeah.
You can, if you want to, you can put load corpus Austin every time, or load
Oh,
corpus, whatever you're. But then that's sort of inefficient in memory and something like that. You really only need to load it one time, and then the object is available to the rest of the notebook. And it's just
okay.
easy to type
Yeah,
my corpus. And you can, by the way, assign it a
okay.
different name. Instead of calling it my corpus, you could say my Austin or the Austin I'm now working on, or
Okay. So I can do that here. Say my Austin, and then
but
I
then
run.
yeah, then you have to change it the next one where it says my corpus, you have to replace that. That won't work now because you have
Yeah,
to
so,
replace it with my Austin.
okay. Yeah, good. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to I think we had a question about categories. So I'm going to show categories and then I think we're out of time. And so let me think about how I'm going to show categories. So first I'm going to go to Zoom and I'm going to take over. And now I'm going to actually launch just plain old vanilla Voyant. I am going to open the Frankenstein text, which is smaller and therefore it's more efficient. So here we are in Frankenstein, the default view. If I go to any of the tools, if I go to the options item, this is where I can set the stop word list, I can set the white word list, and there's this item here that says categories, and it is normally set to auto. When you set it to automatic, it has these two built-in categories, the positive and negative. But what we're going to look at right here is the edit button. The edit button allows you to manage and edit categories. So in this case, you'll see that we have the positive category and the negative category. So we have what we have is a category set with two categories, positive and negative. And in a moment, I'll show what you can do with these things. Um, but I'm going to create a new category. I'm going to call it monster. Now, I can do various things here. I can drag words that seem, sort of scary words. So I'm going to drag the word death. Maybe monster isn't the best word, but anyway, miserable. I'm sort of dragging misery. So I'm going through and I'm making this sort of horror. I'm making sort of list of horrible words, if you will. Creature, here we are. This is a monster word. Bum, 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 bum. Eventually, there is the word monster, but it's not actually used that much in. Do we want strange? Well, let's just leave it at this set of words here. So we've got a set of words, and now for each of these categories, there's actually, you notice there's this button over here, features. So when I click there, you can see the positive words have some graphic features assigned to them. So positive words anywhere in Voyant are going to show up in green in Palatino, and they're going to be horizontal. So for example, in the word cloud, that's what you're going to see. Negative words are going to be red, Palatino, and horizontal. Monstrous words, we can click on this and we can, I don't know, let's sort of assign something brownish. And I could sort of give it a different font and make it vertical. I'm going to save this. And now you'll see where it says categories, I have one of these IDs. So from here on in, if I save this ID, I can use it in any project and I will get the three categories, not the default two. I will get positive, negative, and monster. So now the question is, what can we do with these? So I have this new category ID. I'm going to hit confirm. So one thing, if you had enough words in here, you would see that well, did it do it? No, it didn't seem to do it. Well, let's go into trends here. So I'm just going to look at just trends. And one of the things I can do is if I type the at symbol, I can graph the category, and it seems to be taking its time. Let me check that I save this. Okay. Firm categories. So here we are. I put in at monster, and what it's done is it has graphed the monster's words as if they were one pattern. So the list of words is now treated as one thing. And you'll notice that it's given me the brown line because I assigned that color, the brown color. And you can use this to do a sort of simple version of, you can use this to do a simple version of sentiment analysis. So looking at this, we can see that the negative words, they sort of start evenly, and then somewhere around the fourth, 4 out of 10 chunks through, all of a sudden we have something's going on in this part of Frankenstein that's negative. And then, of course, near the end, it gets more and more negative. Frankenstein is really sort of a tragedy as one after another of his relatives gets killed off and stuff like that. So we can sort of do a simple form of sentiment analysis with this. Now, I'm going to show you how you can use categories. So this is an advanced use, how you can use categories in a more complex way. So we have a series of different notebooks for how to use categories. And I'm going to click this one, Advanced Categories. So we give some example code. Is that what I want? No, that's not what I want. Sorry. Close that one down. Here. So I mentioned that we have available, so they're not loaded unless you call them. We have available a series of categories that come from the General Inquirer project. So this was a project you can read about it. They wrote a book about it. It was a social science approach to text analysis, which take what they would do is that different researchers would validate a category of words, a dictionary of words. So words that have to do with politics, or words that have to do with aggression, or words that have to do with negotiation. So they created all these different categories, and then they would use them in some sense to diagnose texts. It's a little bit a much fancier version of sentiment analysis. And here you can see the list of categories that came from the Harvard dictionary. So the Harvard they produced this Harvard 4 dictionary. So you can see here this is the categories of pleasure pain. So we have a category set called H pleasure pain. It has categories for arousal, virtue, vice, pain, pleasure, emotion, and feel. Overstatement and understatement. Institutions, economic, academic, legal. So we borrowed this all from here, social, work, role, ritual, something like that. So if you want to play with these, you can, and you can play with them inside Speedal. You can load them up and you can play with them. This is much more advanced, and you want to go through these tutorials carefully. So here's using a category with high charts. This shows how you can sort of we're loading Austin. We're loading the categories for pronouns. We then set up the high charts data. So high charts is a library that allows you to build visualizations, which we don't have, like the pie chart. So here you can see we've run it and we've taken the words, we've got words for you, words for names, our, and self, and we've produced a little pie chart. So there's a lot of power here, but you want to acquire a certain comfort level with Speedal and JavaScript before you start using this. You can actually use all those categories just in Voyant without having to learn the programming. You can, as I showed you, go in and edit your own list of categories, your own list of words, if you will. So I'm going to stop there. And there's a quick little skim through the uh, categories feature, but read the documentation in the tutorials. I'm going to stop sharing and take questions.
Time for question, and I understand that many people are not into programming, so it might be today's on is not as light as yesterday's on. So
Yeah,
ask questions that will help you to understand it better, so that we make still so that we will be able to do some kind of self rehearsal on your own. All right, so we have two hands up. I think the first was Joseph. So
Thank you very much, Prof, for again being so generous with your knowledge. Um, I'd like to see how you link all of these visualizations to a research question. For instance, can you sort of come up or maybe can you show us maybe a case that you worked on and how you were able to link all that you've shown today to a research question and then the kind of argument that you made from.
Good point. Yes, I can. We actually, in the list of tutorials, actually, before I do this, why don't I take Rigamore's question and then I might answer them
yeah,
both. So
yeah. My question was is very much linked to what Joseph asked, because I'm imagining using Spiral in my analysis for a research paper or an article or a dissertation or a thesis, and I have a specific set of research focus and research questions. So I would like to hear more about the application at the level of analysis um, inside an academic work.
Okay, so maybe I'll show you some examples. Um, I'm going to start by sharing. So this is the tutorials. If you go down further, you'll see that we actually have some useful examples. So these are actual projects. I'm going to click on this one here, list of services. Augustine and I are part of a group who are studying immigration discourse in Canada. And so the first thing I should say, when I create a notebook for a real research project, I one of the first things I do is I actually describe where the text came from, to document what I'm doing. So this particular little mini project that I did in Spidal, what I did is I took a spreadsheet of projects that were funded by the IRCC in 2020. IRCC is Immigration, Refugees, something Canada. It's the ministry, the federal government ministry that handles immigration. And they give out grants to different people who come up with different projects to help immigrants. So I thought it'd be interesting to sort of go, let's study what it is that they did. And so I've got a link here to the spreadsheet. And then I have a link to the Voyant interface. If you don't want to look through Spidal, you can just click this and you can play with it in Voyant. I have a link to the Bridging Divides, which is the project that is funding this. And then I note that I created a document for each one of the provinces. I wanted to see if there were differences between the provinces, what was being funded. So here you see the first thing is that I am, this is a pane that you have not seen under boom, 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 configuration for a code cell. All of you've only played with code cells, which are JavaScript, but there are different types of code cells that you can call up. In this case, I'm just calling up a code cell which I've already created. I could have just written load corpus whatever, but I decided to use this cell which loads an actual corpus ID, and it assigns it a name, my corpus. So now, and this, by the way, is useful because I run this once, and now all the other stuff should work. It's always useful to check what documents you have. So I run that, and here I can see a summary of the documents. One of the things I did when I created the original Voyant corpus, one of the things you can do if you have a spreadsheet is you can use one column of the spreadsheet to group the other columns. So I had one column had the province names, and there might be 10 projects that were funded in Alberta. And I would, but what Voyant would do when it creates the corpus in the first place is it would group all the Albertan projects as one document, all the British Columbia ones. So that's just the way I entered it. This is some of the real power in Voyant is this ability to work with spreadsheets or with XML to get different sort of subsetting, if you will. And so this just gives me a little sense. One of the things I can see here is Alberta and British Columbia and Ontario. There's a lot more words. So it looks like Manitoba, New Brunswick, Northwest Territories probably only got one project or something like that. In Quebec, there's only one, too. Then what I start doing is I start looking for words. So typically when I'm doing text analysis, I want to see if any words stand out. Oh, and by the way, remember you were asking about the green color. There's a positive word which is being colored green. There's a negative word which is being colored red. So it's something those are the default categories that are built in. So, I can sort of start looking at this in different ways. Now, here I'm playing along. We've done a lot of work of trends. I love trends. And what I wanted to do was to see how, in which provinces were they developing projects that used AI to support immigrants or online tools to support immigrants. So I've created a variable called my query, and then I use that variable here. And you'll notice that I have comments that I could change. So I keep track of the different things that look interesting to search for, and I put that in the comments. So I can now swap this out, and now I can look at literacy and skill. Are they looking for developing literacy skills? Well, in British Columbia, it looks like there's a lot of skills development, but not a lot of talk about literacy. Then I started looking for technology words. Online, digital, data, virtual, AI, tech. I began, and you'll notice that I'm using bar charts. And now we get a big chunk of, no, what am I doing here? What I start doing now is I start using the document terms tool. So this is a tool that allows me to look at the vocabulary of a particular document. So instead of giving me tool terms for the entire corpus, I now want to narrow in on one province. And in the cell above, I'm setting the document to be 0. Remember the business of the indexes? So yeah, so here I'm getting um, so I'm looking at 0. I need to go back up to the document thing here. And 0 is Alberta. So I'm looking closely at Alberta. Even though it says 1 here, in terms of the index, you always start the indexes at 0, 1, 2, so on and so on. That's just a computing thing, which is annoying and confusing to us in the humanities, but it's the way it is. So I've got the doc index is coming from this cell above. So it's 0. I can change it there. And then I'm sorting it by TF-IDF. So what this does is it will sort. I'm going to run this guy first, and then it will sort the words, but it'll sort it by a particular statistical technique, which tells me which words are more salient in the Alberta document than compared to any of the others. So this sort of tells me something about these are the words that are used a lot more in Alberta grants than in the other ones. Counseling, CCIS, online, medical, crisis, Calgary. You'd figure it'd be Calgary. So I could sit there and change this to 1, run it, and now I could see the words that show up in, I think it's British Columbia. And then I'm looking at phrases. It's always useful to see what phrases are being used. Sometimes it can be useful to sort by length. So we can see there's a couple of phrases that show up that have quite a long length. I think that's because there's a case where the spreadsheet actually duplicates the same grant proposal. Um, and I can actually export an array of these phrases. So I can get an array of this and I can export it and then do something with it in a different tool or just put it into an appendix of my paper. So this is sort of shows you a spreadsheet, shows you a notebook that documents a project where I was looking at the language around provinces. Um, and similarly, I have one here. This was a project looking at how Japanese game companies talk about their mission and their values and goals, their slogans, missions, visions, and values. And one of the things I did here, which is interesting, is I have an editable field and I just created, this is my corpus. It's an XML corpus. It's not particularly long, but I created an XML. And then I can import the XML and I can group it by different things. So I can group it by Japanese versus American companies, by the name of the company. So here I'm looking at the different companies that I have: Bandai Namco, Microsoft, which is not Japanese, Nintendo, Sega Sammy, Sony, Square Enix. And I can sort of look at these different words here. Who is using, Microsoft is using the word technology a lot. Nintendo uses the word entertainment a lot. So it's interesting to see how these different companies are positioning themselves in their. I'm looking at their annual reports and how they position themselves. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. You can look through those examples. I can, if you send Augustine and me a note, we can, we have lots of examples that are not sort of publicly available of, just things that we're doing. But we can also comment on, if you tell us what you're studying and something like that, I can, Augustine and I could sort of do a little outline of the things that we would try.
Thank you. There's a question in the chat from Sylvia. We may take that before we call it a day. She asked what queries are they case sensitive? I guess that's what she asked.
So queries are not case sensitive. One of the things that Voyant does is it downcases everything. So that when you search for, and the reason we do this is because a word like banana, if it's at the beginning of a sentence, it'll be a capital B. If it's somewhere in the middle of the sentence, it'll be a lowercase b. And our calculation is that our inference or whatever, our assumption is that people want to count all the instances of the word banana. And so we downcase everything when we index the text. So, yeah. And I see a question from Regamore about published articles and so on like that. And we have on the consortium, Augustine has put a lot of work into building a database of publications, theses, papers, and various things that use Voyant. In fact, if you publish something, tell us about it, and we'll add it to that list and make you famous. So can I change this setting? Let me just check something. You can't change it once you've indexed. Let me just change. There are some settings when you first process the text. No, you can't change that. I will ask the programmer, but I think that's just sort of essential to the way the whole way Voyant and Speedout can be interactive depends on us being able to create an efficient text index which moves quickly, which allows us to sort these things out. If you want to do case sensitive searching, that's where I would you could do it in JavaScript. just loading the text as a text without indexing, without turning it into a corpus. Or you could, of course, do it in Python with one of the linguistics packages that they have. Um, NLTK, I think, is a wide natural language. I forget what TK stands for, tokenizing, something like that, is a very widely used Python library for natural language processing. For that matter, Microsoft Word. Microsoft Word will do case sensitive searches, or if you have a text editor like BBEdit, you can use the search there to find things. Okay, if there are no more questions, I think we've gone over time.
Yeah.
Um, and you now you now know everything you need to know to play with Spiral. You can create notebooks, you can save them, you can edit the text. And we've shown you a whole mess of different ways to be able to create the code cells that will generate what you want, how you can borrow code from different places, how you can use the help to find tool documentation to sort of get exactly the tool you want to play around with, and even giving you a little taste of some of the things that some of the syntax of JavaScript, and especially some of the things to look for when your code doesn't work.
So I've dropped the link to the chat room. We can continue the conversation and other aspect, maybe a project you're working on, so that in the coming days, we'll be able to take a look at them. So thank you so much.
Great idea. That's a great idea. We could maybe spend some time where people talk about their projects and
Yeah, because I think most people have the project in mind and they want to see how to adapt it and other things. So one of the things is Prof has shared some example of real life projects today, along with the codes that we have learned. So let's continue the conversation in the chat room, and then we'll be able to look at other stuff for tomorrow. So thank you very much, Prof, and see you all tomorrow.
I just want to share one last link. This is a project I'm working on right now, which is a student went through Trump's Truth Social posts. So Truth Social is the social media that he likes to use. And we pulled all the posts that had to do with migration and borders. And then yeah, so you can see how I'm trying to study how is it that Trump talks about immigrants and migrants and uses words, he talks a lot about criminals, aliens, and how is he talking about, and there is in there for somebody who's interested in entities, there's a chunk of code that pulls the named people out. We were wondering out, who does he name by name? And it turns out that it's Biden he's really obsessed with Biden. So there you go. Another example that you can look at. See you all tomorrow. And thank you, Augustine, as always, for coordinating this and setting it up. I'm going to say goodbye and see you all tomorrow.
Bye. Thank you. See you all tomorrow. Thanks, Prof.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Yeah, bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. See you in the chat. We continue. And then you can tell us about your topics and other stuff so that in the coming days, we focus on things that matters to your project. Okay. Oh, bye.
Mm,